In this lesson, we're going to take a look at using the session listener objects and being able to create code to attach to the events that are happening on our sessions. So we'll have the City Manager web session listeners.war file. If you want to go ahead and import that to get all the code that we'll be using in this example. We'll be adding a couple different session listeners, and I added them using the Eclipse method of actually just saying add a new listener. And I just attached the information for the listener type that I want to use. So they're not listed in the web.xml in 3.0. So if you're using a version less than 3.0 and you're running into problems, you'll need to manually list the listeners in your web.xml. So we'll also then be looking at one servlet called show active session count. What we're going to do is essentially do two different things with the session. Number one, we're just going to track when a new session is created or destroyed, and we'll count that as an active user on our server. And then we'll have one other thing that allows us to see how we might be able to log session events as they happen or monitor them if we so choose. So let's take a look at active user tracking, which is going to be how we're going to keep track of our users in our system. So we'll have a static integer called active users that we'll use locally here. And essentially, whenever a session is created, we're going to log that a new session was created, and we'll increment our active users. And when a session is destroyed, we'll log that a session was destroyed and decrement our active users. And we need a way to get to our active users so that we can actually display that through our servlet. And so what we'll do on our servlet then is actually just leverage that, simply print out the active user tracking.get active user count so that we can see how many users are actually logged into our system at this time in session. The other thing we're going to look at then is the session listener events that could be attached to the actual events happening on the session, such as removing, adding, and replacing attributes. So here you'll see these take in HTTP session binding events, and from those we're able to easily get the name and value of each of the attributes being added, removed, or replaced in session. Now, I did put a little note here. Because of the fact that we're just kind of doing this generically, we aren't paying attention to what they are. So if you were using some helper classes and you were throwing those helper classes into your session, it would have to have toString to print out here and make any sense. Otherwise, what you could do is use some instance of and determine what object is actually being put into that attribute and then leverage that to get whatever your value is that you want to actually display or log. So just kind of extrapolate from where we're at here to what you might need in your systems. So it's very simple stuff. We have our attributes in place, our listeners in place for both adding users into session and when things are being added as attributes here, they're going to be logged. So let's go ahead and run our application. I'm going to actually minimize this so we can actually start watching the console here. It's going to be important in our system here. So we can see that right now nothing's in session, so our active users are 0. So let's go from show active session count right here in our browser to login.html. That was one of our earlier forms. So here we're going to log in, and it doesn't matter what our username is, it's just going to override it with authorized user level 1, so we don't care what we're putting in here really. And there's our welcome, there's our authorized user. Note that a session was created, attribute was added, username authorized user auth level was 1, so we have a couple of attributes already in place. And then what we can do is actually go back to our show active sessions and refresh that, and now we get that there are exactly 1 active users in the system, which is what we expected. So here's the thing, my current browser in Eclipse is set to work on Google Chrome, so in order to simulate another session, I need to get a different browser type going, and I'm going to do that via Internet Explorer. So what I'll do is go ahead and just copy our URL here, and pull up Internet Explorer, and here we can see we still have 1 active user in the system. So now what I'm going to do is use our cookie example that we had built before. And so this will be index_cookies.html. Now this will allow us to log in with the cookie page and be able to have that tracked in session. So right now we can continue to refresh here and we'll see that nothing's been added at this point. We're going to go ahead and log in. So here's the one where we were using infinite skills before as our login. So let's go ahead and do that again. And our password is 12345678. It really doesn't matter if we remember it ourselves at this point, except for the fact that there should be a JSession ID if we do, but we're logging here. Our infinite skills user is logged in. Now if we look at active users here, we can see that active users is 2. You can see a new session was created and username, infinite skills, user auth level is 1. So here we have a new session created, so we have our 2 sessions. Both of them actually have the same attributes, but because they're in different sessions, we should be okay. One of them showing that it's infinite skills and one of them being authorized user. They should still have some different values. So let's go ahead now and destroy our session here from this one. So that one's going to be done through our invalidate session.do. So this will simulate that we logged out. So there's our session invalidated. And we can see down here now, an existing session was destroyed, username infinite skills, and auth level 1 was removed from the system. And so if we refresh here, we should see now we're down to 1 active user. And once again, we can invalidate here as well. And that says authorized user and 1 was removed. So if we went back to our show users, and there we go, we're down to active user 0, and we've basically been able to log and watch all this information happen as different sessions were created across the system and different attributes were added and removed.